Emancipation, the new Will Smith movie on Apple TV Plus, just came out this past weekend. Originally this was screened in DC, and I believe it was like released to like people in Congress to like kind of like give them this special viewing, and
Mm.
directed by Antoine Fuqua. Will Smith stars as Peter, who is based off of Gordon or Whipped Peter, a famous picture from 1863 of a escaped slave that was circulated at that time, to basically to show the cruelty of slavery, which kind of like crazy to think about at the time, that people weren't just aware of the cruelty of slavery, but many people I think were living in ignorance, which this picture went a long way to like just kind of proving that the war was worth fighting
Yeah.
to help these people.
Popularizing like abolitionism and stuff like that. Yeah, it's definitely a really, I think, a storied artifact was the circulation of that photo, as you said.
And the basically this is shortly after the Emancipation Proclamation is signed. However, the North and the South are still fighting the Confederates and the United States Army. And Will Smith plays the slave who is in a Louisiana um, slave encampment. I don't even want to say it's necessarily like a farm. It's not like a cotton field or anything like that. They're like building embankments and things like that. They're building structures, and he's very religious. Which the only reason I'm saying this because I'll bring it back around to why I think that was like a interesting aspect of the movie, and pretty much decides he needs to escape in order to go to find the Northern Army, which is in Baton Rouge, and this leads to a chase movie, an action movie turned also into a war movie by the end, and it is a weird movie. I don't know if I liked this movie, disliked this movie, because there was just a lot going on. Will Smith plays a Haitian person who is enslaved by like I said, it's a couple people, but Ben Foster plays Fassel, who basically like this overseer of this like slave encampment. Ben Foster, love him as an actor. Again, giving like a really strange performance here. Like a lot of the people are
Huh.
very like a lot of the slave owners and controllers there are very just like stereotypical southern, like over the top, like yelling boy the n-word at these people, and he plays a very like mannered, within himself, like
Huh.
controlled person who's very like sly and cunning and brutal. Like he's just very like cutthroat. He's using his like willingness to not be as cruel to their faces as a way of like getting the slaves to like cooperate with him at times, even though
Mm.
then he'll just
Yeah.
be just as cruel. It brings like a really interesting vibe to the movie. He is kind of a menacing villain, but just like a very strange performance in my opinion, only because it's so different from the movie. And then he has a pretty unceremonious death. Spoiler alert. That I just felt like didn't necessarily hit home for what the movie I think was trying to go for. Smith has an accent in this, which his accent work is always fairly hit or miss, and this one feels more like a miss for me. Um, I think what I found most interesting about this, interesting in not such a good way, is like this movie was highlighting the cruelty, and certainly the cruelty is on 10,000 here. You see slaves get ripped apart by dogs, ripped apart by crocodiles. There's a lot of time spent in swamps. There's just a ton of brutality. But it's like this weird like action chase movie, and it feels like it almost kind of takes away from what the movie's trying to say in a lot of ways.
Huh.
And then once Smith makes it to Baton Rouge, he's forced to join the U.S. Army because he's technically contraband at that time. So he either has to like go back or fight in the army. It feels like a pretty like actually I don't think it was go back. It was like there was another choice that was terrible. So he just and that highlights how at this time it was not good for slaves in any way, even the ones that were being emancipated. But it was just like a weird switch up. So then he had to go and fight in this battle. It is nice when he's reunited with his family at the end. I felt definitely very happy to see that, and I think there's a couple of worthy performances from some of the people down the cast. I didn't know a lot of the supporting cast, but I thought everybody was pretty good for the most part. But overall, just felt a little disjointed, a little strange, um, and just it felt like it was like missing something. Like Smith is doing so much action that he almost doesn't get to really like use his acting chops. When he is acting, it's a lot of his like thoughts are based around his religious beliefs, and so it can be a bit like preachy and like
Mm,
confusing in terms of messaging there as well. So I just felt like overall it could have used a little bit more refining, but I don't think Smith will be getting a Academy Award nomination for this, but
right.
he's done worse stuff too, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of talk about how Emancipation would go right after the slap happened earlier this year, where the talk was that Emancipation was really great. And would Apple still run this movie for awards? Would they hold it? Would they can it completely? Obviously, we know they are putting it out, but it has not been as well received as the early buzz had suggested. So I don't think much more is going to come of that. We'll see what happens
Yeah.
next. Will Smith hasn't been cast anything new as far as I know. This had already been in the can by the time all that everything happened. Anyway, yeah, I don't know, just like me, like my general feelings about stuff like between like 12 Years a Slave and Barry Jenkins' Underground Railroad, I feel like we've just achieved an art like the pinnacle of slave dramas that
Mm,
I think I'm good on seeing black people oppressed and brutalized at this point. I would love to see other stuff. It's like the Woman King, for example, earlier this
yeah.
year, which is a more rousing film, right? Has plenty of action in it, but also uplifting. I think I mean even like the uh Cynthia Erivo Harriet movie from a few years back too. I know that had a bit of action
Mhm.
twist to it too. It just seems like there's not as much to gain anymore dramatically. It feels like it's just going back to the well. And it's like, oh, this is the only thing that gets financed is you know, black people as slaves still. It's like I would love if we could really move beyond it unless you're getting something that's like truly tremendous, like the Underground Railroad or 12 Years a Slave. I feel like, it's unlikely that we would ever get stuff as good as
Mhm.
those two things. So therefore, why don't we just do some other stuff? You know, I'm sure
Uh,
other
I'm
people disagree, but that's kind of how I like these. Don't movies don't get me excited.
right. I'm interested to see how this is received, and maybe it's out there. Just haven't found the article yet. How this is received by people within the Black community. Will
Yeah,
Smith is a huge draw for people within that community to go to the movies. He's one of the most bankable stars for the Black population to actually go out and see something. And this
mm,
is an action movie, so I think there's like an aspect where it's maybe a little bit more palatable to watch something that is so traumatic regarding their history, or the history of some of them. But at the same time, I agree that it's heavy material. It's been done better than this, and I just wonder if this will be a misstep for him, or if this will be something that people actually come to appreciate. I also wonder if they want to keep seeing these kind of stories told over and over again, or if, like you said, maybe they're interested in seeing other Black stories told. So
right.
maybe both. Who knows?